guys for that introduction. I'm not totally sure it's warranted, but I mean, the goal here today is, I think there's a lot of misconceptions that Final Cut 10 is not quite a professional program, and I'm not really going to go into that. I'm simply going to show you some of the things that I do in my workflow and how I work and how I use the program. And I tend to use it, especially for red-based features. It works. And basically, you know, the foundation of it is a Final Cut 10 and DaVinci Resolve pipeline. And the whole idea and what we're trying to do at Lumaforge is to make the jobs of all of the different avenues in post a little bit simpler so you can spend more time actually doing the work and putting that time in on screen and less time troubleshooting and trying to reconform and do all this stuff. And the foundation behind it is that you're always working with your original media as opposed to working offline at some resolution that then you got to conform back to and jump through 9 different hoops or try to figure out how to get down to another timeline. The whole idea is you shoot it and you cut it and you finish wherever you need to go. So whether you're a DIT, assistant editor, editor, online editor, and colorist, and whether you're delivering 4K, 2K, 1080, wherever you need to go, the idea is that you start with your native resolution and you finish later, and you finish however you need to get there. And some other software tools that I may or may not be able to get to, and this is obviously that work with Final Cut 10, that not a lot of people know about. Motion Compressor obviously do. Autodesk Smoke actually for VFX now accepts XMLs out of Final Cut 10. Sync and Link 10, which I'll mention today from Bill Hodgetts and Intelligent Assistants. Thank you guys for making that. It's certainly improved my workflow, and it's kind of an amazing program. Pro Tools will integrate with Final Cut 10 through X2 Pro. Xsan is now $20, and most people think you can't work in a group workflow using Final Cut 10. You can, and it works. And Red Cine X Pro integrates seamlessly with Final Cut 10. I'll be showing you a little bit of that today. And then, you know, you can compress some of the dailies with MPEG Streamclip and Copra 4, but we're going to start with Shotput Pro. And the idea behind the DIT, right now, a lot of producers think they just copy files. Our vision of the DIT is that they are prepping a usable project to come back to post from set, using the original media that's been transcoded, batched, renamed, and ready to go so that the assistant editor can get going, actually serving the editor as opposed to reinventing the wheel and just pushing some buttons to get some things to work. Now on set, there's a little program called Shotput Pro that's $99 that is going to give you checksummed copies to wherever you need them to go. It's very simple, very straightforward, and is great for what people think the DIT should do, which is copying files. And from there, we're going to talk about Red and Epic workflow, which a lot of people think is really complicated, but it doesn't need to be. In fact, in some ways it can be simpler because you can fix problems easier if you're always working with your raw footage. Right now, offline, you're not really able to do that, and that's why I think people have problems. But, you know, Premiere does it as well, and Final Cut 10, I think, has a great workflow where you start, you can always access your raw, and it works seamlessly. And the fundamental step, the first thing I'm going to show you is you want to make an RMD, which is a red metadata file, initially right upon import. Sometimes, in some cases, the camera won't make one for you. And the first step, when you bring in a reel of footage, and I'm going to come in here, and it's a really simple process before you bring it anywhere into Final Cut 10, this is Red Cine X Pro here, is you want to make an RMD across all of your clips as you bring them in. The footage we're going to be working with today is day 8 here, and there's all these different mags. So if I want all of these to show up in a bin, I'm simply going to right-click and open a new bin and include subfolders. I'm going to see this bin down here open, and then to make RMDs across all of these clips so that my raw information travels from my red files to Final Cut 10 to Resolve, all I need to do is select these files, push Command A, right click, save RMD. And I've done that already, and then your raw information that you make is going to travel across the pipeline, and you can update it along the process. And as long as you made an RMD, bring it into Final Cut 10. Any changes you make in Final Cut 10 will update on the RMD and vice versa. So next up is importing your red footage into Final Cut 10. This could not be simpler. Now, when I step into Final Cut 10, I've made different events here that kind of represent the different stages of an edit. Let me kind of expand this out a little bit. So we've got DIT, Assistant Editor, Editor, Online Editor. Here, when I open this up, I have a Day 8 collection with a whole bunch of 4K epic footage. And it's already in here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how simple it is to bring in your red footage. I'm going to make a new keyword collection, call it Day 9. And I'm going to step into the Finder, and I'm going to find my Day 9 footage. I'm simply going to drag this folder into my Day 9 keyword collection, and it's going to take a second, continue import, and as you're going to see in a second, all of, and actually, what happened? Where's the rest of my, wow, okay. Yeah, how do I, the green button, the green button at the top left, oh, right, there we go, this green button. There it is, that's what I was looking for. Okay, so as you can see, all of my red footage has now come in, and I'm getting real-time playback of 4K epic files directly in the viewer. It took 2 seconds to bring in. And now I can simply go in, if I want to modify the raw, I can go across all of these clips, and in the info tab of the inspector, scroll down, modify red raw settings. I can globally adjust the color space, change the tint, do any of these things directly to them. It's going to update across all of the clips that I've selected. And I'm ready to go and start working with my raw footage in about 10 seconds. Now, probably the feature in Final Cut 10 that has saved me more time than any single feature is batch rename. And what is that exactly? Well, basically, within Final Cut 10, if we come over here and I kind of extend this out a little bit, if you look at the way I've named all of these clips here, 21B, can be, there's 11 takes of this. And if you look at the metadata side, you'll see that I've entered in scene number, scene metadata, camera angle metadata, and the clips have been renamed based on the scene and camera angle metadata with a counter next to it. Now, how did I do this? Well, basically, you enter in metadata in Final Cut 10, and now I can go in here and quickly across all the clips, I can just call this test, and it works kind of like a spreadsheet where you update across clips. I'm going to undo that, but if you've seen, the camera angles are now renamed test, and the same with the scene metadata. So as I batch rename, I can quickly go through my clips, and I did a longer version of this in the Moviola webinar, but the basic idea here is you can use custom naming presets in Final Cut 10 to name your clips based on metadata that you globally enter. So if I go back to the original name from the camera, for instance, this is how the clips were originally named. Now when I step in here, I can go to Apply Custom Name. I've made a naming preset called Scene Angle Counter, and I'll show you how I did it. If I step into the batch renaming, the preset editor here, I simply drag in tags based on how I want Final Cut to name my clips. So what I've done is I've dragged this little tag up here in your scene. I put an underscore next to it. I drag the angle up, and then there's a counter on there at the end. And the counter is going to increment starting at 1 with a number of digits 2. Now I've got 11 different clips here that I want, takes 1 through 11 to get renamed scene 21B underscore cam B with a counter next to it. All I do to do that, apply custom name, scene angle counter, they've been renamed. And this is, for me, an extremely fast way to work. I can prep a project now in a matter of minutes. And now, using Sync and Link, if you've recorded second source audio with timecode and you've properly done it, you can then send out an event XML if you select the event first and go export XML, it's going to send this XML out that you can then import into Sync and Link here. So let's open the XML. And what it's going to do is it's going to take all of my red clips, or any of those clips for that matter, and it's going to attach the audio to it and rename them according to how I've named them already in Final Cut 10. So literally in a matter of seconds, I can get all of my footage synced while I'm on set and have it attached. And not only that, but it's going to make QuickTime reference movies. And I'm jumping a little bit ahead here, so let me get caught up here. Oh, no, I'm not. So you can attach audio directly to your red clips. It's going to send it back in the way you send it out in Final Cut 10, into Final Cut 10, the way you've already renamed it, with your audio attached. So basically, when I step back in here to Final Cut 10, I have this event that's been named synced, and now I go into my synced keyword collection, and if I come down here, whereas before I did not have audio, I now have an audio tab with my connected audio, and it's actually even been renamed according to roles that the audio record is assigned to it. So basically, what this allows you to do, whereas if you had to go through this whole transcoding dance and do all this stuff and you can't do anything until you get it back into post, the DIT can now actually deliver a fully operational project to post that they can then start editing with. And most people would say, well, what does the assistant editor do now? Oh, and actually one last thing I can show you. The other great thing that Sync and Link does is that it makes dailies. You can use it to make dailies as well. So for instance, you can have it generates QuickTime proxies that you can then use MPEG Streamclip or some other program to transcode, post on the iPad for producer review, and put them up on Dropbox, wherever you want to go, but it's going to generate these upon syncing, so you can transcode that while you're back in Final Cut 10 continuing to work. Okay, and that actually brings us up to what does the assistant editor do now that their traditional job has already been done for them, theoretically? Well, that's one of the kind of beauties of Final Cut 10 is if I step into this assistant editors event here, basically you'll see all of these different smart collections and keywords have already attached. And smart collections work like filters. So basically upon import, I've designed this smart collection to automatically import files based on frame sizes that I've specified. So the first thing that an assistant editor would do would be to go through all of these smart collections, and you should probably have a smart collection event that's a default, so you can just literally drag this folder into your various events, and it's going to show up there, and it's going to work as automatic filter setting. But if you go through and you keyword then based on all of these smart collections, it's going to create keywords that are then searchable later on in your edit. So if you've noticed, I've created keywords based on frame size, based on R3D, and then also the assistant editor would set up scene numbers or bins based on scene number, typical to the way that you do in Final Cut 7. And the real advantage of the metadata is the clips don't have to live in one place. So they can live in all of these different collections, and it's just different ways for you to find media. And from there, what the assistant editor will actually be spending more of their time doing is creating something called favorite ranges. So when we come in here, and the great thing about Final Cut 10, I find, is that you can have selections living directly on your clips that you can reference at any time, at any point later in the edit, and they don't go away unless you want them to, and they're called favorite ranges. So basically, what the assistant can then do is go through the clips and actually serve the editor by parsing down these massive amounts of footage that we're now shooting daily on, like you have these giant multicam shoots, and you have there's more and more footage being shot, and people just let the cameras roll, but it's impossible to sift through it. And that's really, I think, what the assistant editor probably needs to be doing to serve the editor, so they're not just deluged with a mountain of footage to look at. And if you drag across a clip, you can have multiple of these, and it's as simple as pushing F to make a favorite range. and then you can rename it and call it line C. And as you go through, you can then make smarter string outs than you normally would that you can even reference back in the event browser by selecting clips based on how you've named them. And I push E, and they're going to drop right in the timeline at the end of the sequence. And you can configure these any way you want. Basically, the more organized you are at the beginning, the more effective working in the timeline is going to be for you later. And the coolest thing, especially with red footage, is the offline and online workflow. So when I switch back to my DIT event up here, and I go into Preferences, and I go to Playback, and I hit Use Proxy Media, everything goes offline, because I haven't transcoded proxies yet. However, what you can do is you can flip back and forth, just like that, between all of your R3D and proxy media, and all the proxy media is a half-size render of your original R3D media. So basically, when I switch out of here and I come into this event where I've actually created proxy media, I now have offline versions of all of my R3D footage to cut offline with. So basically, at the end of the day, when the assistant editor's done, they just let this transcode overnight. The next day, you have proxies that are always going to reference your R3D footage. And for instance, when I step into the edit here, because I have a little string out that we'll be working with, and we'll just give this a second. And when I step in here where I've transcoded proxies, and they are actually, oh, did these go away? Oh, no, they're here. Okay, here we go. So there's one that I have not transcoded proxies because I did this at Moviola yesterday and it changed. But now I can go in here, and when I'm done editing, I'm now back to my R3Ds, proxies, R3Ds, proxies. This is, I think, a breakthrough in a lot of ways, because you get the benefits of cutting offline and being able to stay online, and I'm still in a 4K sequence, and it's just a question of what media I'm referencing and when I need to do it.
So it makes conforming a little bit easier than other approaches.
Now, one of the other things that no one seems to talk about when they talk about Final Cut 10 is the way the markers work, and more specifically, the timeline index itself and how how quick it is to go and move through your timeline now and find things. So I'm jumping from marker to marker with my timeline index over. But even better is I can search for clips based on keyword and size. So for instance, the reason I did all of that sizing is so that I can then go through and select all of my 4K clips. And now, if I step in here, and actually let's just go ahead and switch back over to the R3Ds here. So now we're working directly from our R3Ds. And I can go and resize globally all of these clips directly from the timeline simply by searching them. So if I need to step down to a 1080 sequence or do any of that stuff, I can make these adjustments, and it's going to apply to all of these 4K clips. So let's undo that. Additionally, there's been a lot of flack about the way they did markers in Final Cut 10. I actually think it's a better way to do it. So let me get rid of this filter here. And for instance, if you go through for client review, for instance, and you jump, say you need a different performance take, as you go through, these are called to-do markers. So I can simply step in here, I'm going to open up an audition, swap through with the client, find the one they like, and now it's done. And when I'm done with that, I simply hit this, and I go in, and this is going to show up in my completed to-do items list. And not only that, but you can change all of your completed to-do items and put little markers. There's this little adjustment layer where I can put chapter markers, and when I export my a QuickTime of this for producers to check out, when they open up their QuickTime export on Dropbox or wherever it is they want it to be, and I click over here, they can quickly jump to all of the changes I've made along the way. And it's going to be renamed based on what I've done and how I've done it. Additionally, speed changes are far easier now. So if I do Command-R, that's going to open up the speed change menu. I can simply modify it this way, do whatever I need to do. Or I can even have it be based on range and go in and go into the retime menu, speed this up, and I can base that on the section of the clip I need as well. Where are we at here? So anyway, when you're done editing, that's just kind of scratching the surface of some things you can do in the timeline. But when you're done editing, you just switch back over to your original media, and you can prep for VFX in Smoke, and you can also export an XML directly into Resolve. And basically, you can, and if you want to send your mix to Pro Tools, you can using X2 Pro. That's actually very doable. It's going to send an AAF, which is actually better than an OMF. And you can also grade your RAW directly in Final Cut 10 by simply selecting a clip, and you go under Info. You can modify directly in the timeline from there. And I'm going to continue there. And I can change the tint here directly from the timeline and go clip to clip that way. I can also go into Red Cine X and import an XML that way. And if I push the green button again, where you have a lot more control over your R3D media, you have a lot more, you can really go into great detail into grading your RAW, and it's going to take an XML, and if I simply make a change there, and I flip back into Final Cut 10, it's already updated there, right there in the timeline, and I can go back and forth and grade, and it's going to update pretty much in real time. So let me undo that.
And when we demo this at our place or at NAB, we're doing this across Xsan, so you can have 10, 12 different guys working on exactly the same copy of the R3Ds at the same time.
So anyway, you would then go ahead and prepare your projects at multiple resolutions, just duplicate projects, and then you can go and rescale based on aspect ratio if you need to downscale to 1080 and do all that stuff I was describing in the timeline earlier. And prepare your project for Resolve. And you can have multiple different XMLs, so let's go jump into Resolve. And you'd import your XMLs, so as you can see, I've got a 4K and a 1080 XML here that have come into Final Cut 10. They're going to keep the same grades, and they're going to keep my sizing settings that I brought into Resolve. And basically, I grade, export renders of those out, import them back into Final Cut 10, and then I conform in Final Cut 10 as necessary. I can even go and open this up, and if I need to modify, say I need a 235 1080 deliverable as well as a full frame, and I need to adjust based on aspect ratio, I can turn this, I put a adjustment layer in there, and I turn it back on. It's going to put a 235 mat on it, and then I select a clip, and now I can adjust for 235 spacing directly in there from my 16:9 full frame master. You would add in your sound mix, and you can share in bundles. Bundles basically allow you to send multiple exports out at the same time when you go home, so you can deliver multiple different resolutions to different places. It's really simple and straightforward. So anyway, that's about all the time I've got for the moment, unfortunately. I had to kind of speed through this. Do it. Oh. But the basic benefits of this are cutting and finishing in 4K is basically now pretty much as simple as 1080. It's actually simpler because you're cutting natively in a 4K timeline. A lot of the typical tasks that we normally go through, especially on the assistant side, have been really sped up. And you spend less time on the difficult stuff and less time on troubleshooting. You can finally now take advantage of your RAW workflow and the whole reason you shot with Red and RAW in the first place. And this can all be done from a Retina MacBook Pro. And
a Thunderbolt drive.
And a Thunderbolt drive, although you will get real time on an eSATA drive. And so, anyway, that's about all I got.